Hello everyone, welcome to day 37 of this 40 days with the Holy Spirit and to our last week together as we look at this book by Jack Levison, and before we look at the next chapter of what we might share beginning at the end of this week. But today we're looking at blossoming as part of this final chapter, and blossoming we usually think of wonderful moments of joy and love and sharing and generosity. And they are, and many of the readings are around that. But today the reading is very different. It's the only time the Holy Spirit actually appears in Mark's Gospel, and this is what it has to say. From Mark chapter 13, these are the words of Jesus. As for yourselves, beware, for they will hand you over to councils, and you will be beaten in synagogues, and you will stand before governors and kings because of me, as a testimony to them. And the good news must first be proclaimed to all nations. And when they bring you to trial and hand you over, do not worry beforehand about what you are to say, but say whatever is given you at that time. For it is not you who speak, but the Holy Spirit who speaks within you. Brother may betray brother to death, and a father his child, and children may rise up against parents and have them put to death, and you will be hated by all because of my name. But the one who endures to the end will indeed be saved. So they don't seem very encouraging words, do they? And partly that's because Mark was writing at a time where the whole of Jerusalem was full of anger, was full of the desire to stand up against Rome, and they were just about to start a rebellion, which started in AD 66, and then the Roman army came and laid siege for 4 years to the city before they burnt it to the ground. And in amongst all that, you have the idea that the small Christian community would itself be held to account. And what do you do when you're in really tough places? And how do you remain faithful when everything within you talks about just go with the flow, just keep your head down, be quiet? And what happens to those Christians around the world when they do get arrested? How do you remain faithful? Well, there's a gentleman called Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who some of you know, Howard, myself and many others are quite into. And he lived at the time of the Second World War. He was a pastor who stood up against the whole idea of the German Nazi regime. And they formed something called the Confessing Church, a little church that offered a very different perspective to that of power and violence at the time of the 1930s and 40s in Germany. And he was not only someone who preached love, he also stood to try and change the world. And in the process, he got arrested and was eventually executed. But during his time in prison, he became a sort of a chaplain to all those who were about to be executed. And he used to hear their confessions, and he wrote poems and writings in prison, and a bit like Paul really, and many thousands of people listened and waited for his every word. But here is one of his poems, and this is how we can actually undermine power and violence, not by trying to be more violent or more strong or more powerful, but actually by choosing to surrender and give ourselves not to the powers, but to God. And this is what Bonhoeffer does, and I'd like to share this poem with you. Just grab it. Beautiful poem. It's called Who Am I? Who am I? They often tell me. I would step from my cell's confinement calmly, cheerfully, firmly, like a squire from his country house. Who am I? They often tell me. I would talk to my warden freely and friendly and clearly, as though it were mine to command. Well, who am I? They tell me. I would bear the days of misfortune equitably, smiling proudly, like one accustomed to winning. Am I then really all that other men see me of? Or am I only what I know of myself, restless and longing and sick? Like a bird in a cage, struggling for breath, as though hands were compressing my throat, yearning for colour, for flowers, for the voices of birds, thirsting for words of kindness, for neighbourliness, trembling with anger at despots and petty humiliation, tossing in expectation of great events, powerlessly trembling for friends at an infinite distance, weary and empty at praying, at thinking, at making, faint and ready to say farewell to it all. Who am I, this or the other? Am I one person today and tomorrow another? Or am I both at once? Therefore a hypocrite before others, and before myself a contemptible woebegone? Or is something within me stilled like a beaten army fleeing in disorder from victory already achieved? Who am I? Will they mock me, these lonely questions of mine? Well, whoever I am, thou knowest, O Lord, and I am thine. Brilliant. Absolutely wonderful. How to overcome and allow the Holy Spirit to speak. Have a good day.